Welcome to the Michelle Meow Show at the Commonwealth Club of California. I'm John Zipper, the club's Vice President of Media and Editorial, and Michelle's co-host here at the club. Now, we hope you are staying safe and are well wherever you are. We look forward to seeing you in person someday in the future at the Commonwealth Club's headquarters in San Francisco. Until that happens, we are doing all of our programming online. This is the latest in more than 275 online programs the club has produced in the past 7 months. You can find all of our upcoming programs, as well as audio and video from our past events and how you can help support our program production at commonwealthclub.org. If you are watching us live on YouTube, you can use the chat function to post questions for our panelists, and we'll work some of those into our conversation here today. And we have a lot to talk about tonight with our special guest, Joshua Wong, who is joining us live from Hong Kong. 23 years after Britain's handover of Hong Kong to China, the government in Beijing has begun to deepen its control over the politics of this special administrative region. Despite mass protests and muted criticism from the West, Beijing's communist government has put into place rules constraining democracy and free speech. We'll get into all of that, as well as the democracy activists in other countries that are looking to Hong Kong for support. Now, let me introduce Michelle Meow. She's a member of the Commonwealth Club's Board of Governors and the producer and host of the Michelle Meow Show. Good to see you again, Michelle.
Thank you so much, John. Always a pleasure to have you as the co-host and to be in company with you on this program. And thank you to the Commonwealth Club for providing the space and platform for us to have these discussions. A little bit about our guest tonight, if you're hearing of him for the first time, or just a fresh reminder if you know of him. He's been named by Time, Fortune, Prospect, and Forbes as one of the world's most influential leaders. In 2018, he was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for his leading role in the Umbrella Movement. He was the former Secretary General of Demosisto. Joshua came into the political scene in 2011 at age 14 when he founded Scholarism and successfully protested against the enforcement of Chinese national education in Hong Kong. He has been arrested numerous times for his protesting and activism, and has served over 100 days in jail. He has been the subject of 2 documentaries, including the Netflix original Joshua, Teenager versus Superpower. And now it's the first time his work has been published in English with his newly released book, Unfree Speech, The Threat to Global Democracy and Why We Must Act Now. Joshua, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation. And it's my honor and pleasure to share more of my thoughts and ideas, especially even we are under the crackdown of Beijing.
That is right. That is right. And I can't tell you how much we're so honored you're taking the time out. There's a lot happening right now, not only in Hong Kong, in China, but other parts of the world. I think, where we can start off before we dive into what's happening right now is starting with you and talking about, what really drove you to advocacy and activism. As John had mentioned, you had been born into Hong Kong during a very specific time in the handover. And so your experiences are different than most before your time. But a set of policies, I believe, would lead you to become the big giant voice that you are today. Let's talk about some of those policies that were, that Beijing tried to impose that really drove you to your advocacy.
Yeah, as the 24 years old activist in Hong Kong, how I experienced the one country, two system promise has been eroded to be one country, one system under the hardline crackdown of Beijing. And also is how Beijing continue to tightening the grip and the original freedom that deserve to enjoy by Hong Kong people. So, which is really difficult for us to overcome it. But for me, the starting point is at the age of 15, I start to engage in social movement when Beijing decided to impose the brainwashing education to force all the primary and high school students not only love the country, but even loyal to the regime. That my starting point to found the student activist group Scholarism. And through rally, demonstration, campaign, and etc., at the age of 15, finally, I mobilized more than 100,000 Hong Kongers, surrounded the government headquarters, and successfully forced the government withdraw the evil plan to impose the national education brainwashing policy to a student in Hong Kong. What I believe is the future of young generation to determined by themselves instead of our future that being dominated by those upper class elite belongs to the upper class or the red capitals or pro Beijing camps. And that's my starting point to realize that actions speak louder than words, and we need to make change in the society.
Obviously, we want to talk about a lot of the things that Beijing is doing and trying to do in Hong Kong. I'm a bit curious on what, I mean, because a lot of people, unfortunately, in so many countries these days, including the United States, a lot of people are perfectly content to sit by and watch as democratic norms and democratic rights are taken away. Why did you not take that route? Why did you, what inspires you or what drives you to be someone who stands up and puts yourself at risk for democracy?
My name Joshua is come from Bible, Joshua and Bible. That's my parents wish me just like Joshua and Bible that uphold social justice, and we wish that people live in Hong Kong can not being under the rule of the tyranny in the future. And I would say that Hong Kong is the place that I born, I live, and I love a lot. And with the sense of belongings, I am proud to be a Hong Konger. I wish that we can determine our future and we make change because we hope the place that we live can be a better place. And I think that's my starting point and motivation. So in the previous journey, since the age of 15 till now, almost 10 years, I've been arrested for 10 times and being jailed for 3 times. And right now I still have 3 court cases to handle. And next week, I still need to attend the court hearing. But I would say that the threats can't defeat me, make me even stronger determination. Especially, I wish people could realize that compared to other more low-profile activists that has been jailed for 4 years, 6 years, or how 16 years old high school student in Hong Kong being fired by live round by the riot police or etc. I have only served 100 days in prison. The price I pay is just a small piece of cake. And with the courage and determination and the support of Hong Kong people, that's my duty and responsibility to go forward.
Let's get into the policies, attitude of China, and kind of how that also shapes your feelings, your views as an activist. In your most recent book, you talk about China's Belt and Road Initiative, and I'll go ahead and read an excerpt from there. And the initiative is to challenge America's dominance in world trade and global diplomacy. In many ways, the one country, two systems formula for Hong Kong is also how the communist leadership views its relationship with the rest of the world. In his grand vision of a new global order, President Xi is advancing a one world, two empires framework in which the United States and its allies defend their liberal, rights-based ideology, while China and other one-party states demand non-interference from the free world and quietly pursue an oppressive and expansionary agenda. Quite a description. So let's dive into that in terms of, what do you mean?
In the past 2 decades, Beijing's aggressive expansion in Europe, Asia, and Africa has given a warning signal to democratic states all over the world. I believe the world is awakening from the Chinese nightmare since Xi Jinping, who uphold and took the leadership in China and Hong Kong. But perhaps the international community has, in hindsight, only too little imagined the determination of Beijing to crush the promise of one country, two systems. If we are determined to safeguard democratic aspiration under the retreat of democracy, we must act to defy China's dictatorial grip. And I'm particularly inspired by the movement in Belarus and Thailand this year, partly because of how the protests found at most of the protest scene in Hong Kong in 2019. It's also because of the emotion invoked by recalling the memories of last year. And Hong Kongers, including me, are moved by the courage of the arrest student activists in Thailand, even though we have not met them in person. And I think the situation of Hong Kong is very much as same, and thanks to Twitter and social media, it break through the traditional media barrier. We know that Hong Kongers never walk alone. So despite all this change, I believe together we are making some very beautiful synergy, and among the free world, a greater force with more resolute determination is emerging. And I find it empowering because despite the physical distance, people from different places, no matter in Hong Kong, in Western world, or in Asia, if we believe in democracy, freedom, and etc., even we are facing similar difficulties while fighting for the same goal, we still are on the same side. That's the reason that why we always emphasize the importance of Stand with Hong Kong.
You know, here I mentioned the United States. Obviously, we're in the United States, but I think what's struck a lot of people in the United States over the past 4 or 5 years is the sad realization of just how many millions of our countrymen are perfectly fine with an authoritarian leader and with restrictions and you know, maltreatment by the government and such. What stick with Hong Kong, but we could also talk then about Thailand. But I mean, in Hong Kong, where do you think the mass of the people are? Are you a voice of them, or are you a voice of a student generation that maybe it doesn't have, you know, is differing from parents and grandparents in their aspirations?
Hong Kong is a global city with only 7 million population, but we have more than 10,000 people were arrested since last summer because of the protests. 2,000 people were prosecuted. More than 100 of us were already physically locked up in prison. And the youngest one being arrested during protests was just at the age of 11. The oldest one at the age of 84, which means that no matter the generation of baby boomers or the generation of millennials and Gen X, all we stand as one with solidarity and unity. Perhaps people always assume that only student or young generation might engage in political movement. But from my experience in Hong Kong, it's the cross-generation collaboration. No matter elderlies that escape from the Cultural Revolution in China and come to Hong Kong and stay for perhaps 5 or 6 decades already, they are they're highly involved in our protest movement. Or how millennials or youngster born after the transfer of sovereignty in Hong Kong, we also realize that if greater city, just like New York or London, people can elect the mayor, so why can't Hong Kong people elect our government? The only request for us is to have a vote to push forward democratic reform and let people to be the master of our own house. And since last summer, perhaps in lots of country or places, it might happen some of the protests with more than 1 million population talk to the street within the same day. But in Hong Kong, such a city with only 7 million population, on last summer, within June, we have 2 out of 7 million Hong Kongers talk to the street within the same day. It might not be the largest protest within the history of the world, but it might be almost the largest protest with the highest ratio in this century, that almost 20% of the people in this city talk to the street within the same day, and that's already the history of people.
I want to talk a little bit about, you know, the point that you just made in terms of the movement being cross-generational. I also think that you've been extremely successful in being able to pull in, you know, other alliances, such as the United States. The United States and the efforts of folks like yourself, you know, had just signed a bill, the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act. I'd love for you to talk about that and just kind of, you know, your thoughts of what the movement reaching out to different allies from around the world, you know, for a pro-democracy movement.
We wish the world could stand with Hong Kong, but it's really important to emphasize the draconian national security law is a repressive tool against protesters and destroy our judicial system in Hong Kong. And this law is newly implemented to Hong Kong 4 months ago. And under the pretext of national security, this law in Hong Kong purports to target acts of collusion with foreign force, but Beijing has never defined exactly what is collusion, but it will wield massive discretionary power to punish activists and cut off Hong Kong from international society and their crucial support on the other. And perhaps under the arbitrary and the broad definition of Beijing, maybe conducting this interview or sharing might also be under the definition of collusion with foreign force. So as for myself, since July, I have been under state surveillance and harassment on a daily basis. I had been in the most extreme cases, more than 3 vehicles tell me through the day, the risk of being arrested and even being extradited to China is higher now compared to the before the law is implemented. So I would say that within the previous summer is all the difficult time that we face, no matter how the authorities call off the election and cancel it within this year with the excuse of COVID-19, and how our parliament in Hong Kong is replaced by an unconstitutional appointment. More and more crackdown will follow, and the authorities are keen to control every aspect of the society. And we have judge resigned for having doubts on the national security law. We have church under complaints or for being sympathetic to protester. Now they turn to civil servants, requiring them to pledge to Beijing government before taking a job. We even have teacher being fired ridiculously, being fired because what he taught at class was not tolerated by the government. So I would say that it's upsetting because we all know what is happening is intimidation and control by fear. But as a political activist and one of Beijing most disliked, I believe to make our dissident voice heard is indeed a matter of survival. So if our voice is banned, there is absolutely no way we can enjoy freedom in other aspects. And that's the reason I think the world, no matter politician, ordinary citizens, people in entertainment industry or opinion leader, they could be the one that also send a clear signal to Beijing. Wolf warrior diplomacy is not the way out, and it's important to allow Hong Kong people to enjoy freedom.
Talk a bit, if you would, about the Milk Tea Alliance, how that came about, and especially to maybe Western audiences, the roots of the name and what you're doing.
So I think which would be really great for me to share more of the idea about the Milk Tea Alliance, because frankly speaking, 4 or 6 years ago, when we talk about international collaboration, always is only about politician in the Capitol Hill or in London. They might be the one that engage in the support or be one of the stakeholders in global solidarity campaign, or other than politician, it might be only INGO, just like Amnesty International, and that's all. But I think for the Milk Tea Alliance, that is not kind of formal structural political alliance organization, but this is the new innovative idea that allow every netizens in the world, they could show each of their support, especially if they live in Asia. So no matter people in Hong Kong, Taiwan, or Thailand, if they are under the greatest suppression, we will generate greater resistance with our solidarity. And no matter the online Twitter campaign that we have launched with the hashtag of Stand with Thailand, or how we bring the idea of Milk Tea Alliance, this innovative idea, from online to offline. We organize protests outside the Royal Thai Consulate in Hong Kong, or how Thai activists or people in Taiwan support Hong Kong a lot in last year's protests. I think those also implying that together we are the louder voice that cannot be silenced. And this kind of grassroots diplomacy on social media also generated tremendous differences and pressure for authorities for them to deal with.
Staying on Milk Tea Alliance and the growing anti-government movement in Thailand, I think if you're not catching it, you can Google it, but it's in the news. and it's making major headlines with thousands upon thousands of young folks. I think 70% of the folks who are going out to protest right now in Thailand are young people. Some might think that this is a little bit surprising coming from, a country like Thailand that seems democratic. But if you could talk a little bit about, perhaps the background of it, the growing movement of young people who are growing impatient, maybe tired of their current, government structures, and even understanding, what's happening in Thailand. I think the older generation might be asking, like, what exactly do the young people want?
Always, when we look into the protests in Thailand in the previous 2 or 3 decades, always people might have the stereotype or assumption it might just only about the struggle or the conflict within the Thai authorities, especially the king of Thailand and etc. And it's not directly related to the universal value or the structural reform or etc. But I think in 2020, for the generation, especially for those millennials, most of them are never highly engaged in those political movements 10 or 20 years ago, and they come out to the street just because of a simple message is they help to ask for freedom and democracy, no matter about media censorship, political suppression, prosecution towards dissident, are all not the way out anymore for Thailand. And for the young generation, they also emphasize that they were inspired by Hong Kong, and also I think how Taiwan activists also engage a lot in the global community to prove that even people live in Asia deserve democracy. Even Chinese people should enjoy free election. So I think this kind of collaboration already implying that how we have the differences. And compared to the previous few protests in the in 2 or 3 decades ago, we can make more change and learn from the history and hope to go forward in the future.
We've kind of talked about some of the methods that, and a lot has been written about the methods that protesters have used in Hong Kong, both to organize as well as to kind of get around some of the surveillance and police tactics. And I guess a lot of that has been adopted in Thailand, and I'm reading it's been adopted in some other places, Indonesia, Malaysia. Do you think this is an approach that pro-democracy protesters can use in pretty much any country in the world? Belarus, Turkey, Philippines?
I believe the spontaneous online movement and the strategy within street protests in Hong Kong since 2019 both play an essential role in this unprecedented movement in 2020 in a different country. And we observe a ripened mobilization on Twitter. Here in Hong Kong, we even develop a daily assignment for protesters and democratic supporters to participate on this frontier. Each day, you have got a list of essential tweets to comment or retweet to boost protest-related content in the hot topics. So I would say that following the Thailand movement, we connected to share some Thai hashtag, even we don't know how to pronounce them properly. So I think this kind of online spontaneous collaboration, which is really amazing. 2 or even 1 decade ago, social media is not popular as in 2020. So it's still far away for us to engage in it. But with the popularity of social media, just like Twitter in Hong Kong, it already become the important platform and tools for us to deliver our voice.
I'll say this, I think that, the movement has been successful in putting pressure in certain countries as far as highlighting the issues that people might not be paying attention to, such as the atrocities that are impacting ethnic Muslim minorities in countries like China and Malaysia, and as well as even climate change, climate justice, in aligning with young activists like Greta Thunberg. Your feelings in terms of shared values as far as, I mean, let's just face it, yes, the younger generation are waking up, they are knowledgeable, they have lots of information about what's happening, and they have the courage to speak up about these things, with the use of social media. These shared values are not specific to just one, country that is abusing human rights. Are countries with authoritarian leaders or people who are violating human rights, do you think that they are listening, as young people are waking up to these issues?
Um, I would say that from the perspective as a Hong Konger, it still need more time for the ruling class to realize that the momentum and the practice changed already compared to 10 or 20 years ago, because netizen and how the grassroots diplomacy on social media, uh, those already generated tremendous differences to the protest movement compared to how they handled those crises in 2 or 3 decades ago. Just take a normal example. I think the 2019 Hong Kong protests compared to the 1989 student movement in Tiananmen Square in Beijing, even it's only 3 decades, but it's totally different. No matter global pressure, netizen engagement, and even in 1989 is still the era that without internet. So I think with this kind of change, the ruling class or those or for those world leaders that belongs to authoritarian country or city might not really easy for them to reflect and to understand that the game has changed already. And especially for those countries have no idea to deal with the free flow information on social media and internet, just like how China set up the Great Firewall, or how we realize that they would love to use the Wolf Warrior diplomacy, expand its influence in Belt and Road Initiative. And I would say that's one of the reasons why people in Thailand care Hong Kong or China a lot. Part of the reason is about the Belt and Road Initiative. Thai government is also one of the participants or in this cross-border infrastructural development. So with this kind of idea and ambitious for China to expand its influence, it's just trigger more and more risk of eroding the liberal value and the international order that we believe in. But at the same time, it also generated more opportunity for activists to have more collaboration, because we have the same enemy and the same challenges, or even the same issue that we need to oppose it.
And I think you've done some of this on your social media, pointed out China using its international powers, connections, money, and all of that, especially through its Belt and Road partners or whatever, clients, to exert pressure on people who are speaking out against China and Chinese policies elsewhere, such as the Turkish-German soccer star Mehmet Ozil, I believe, who was left out of I think it was Championship League play because of pressure from China. Do you see China? Is there any organized sense internationally among activists and others, policymakers and such, to try to address that, so that China doesn't get to just go and throw its weight around everywhere, and doing it within its own borders can be bad enough. Doing it among around the world can be lethal.
That's why I think Hong Kong mastered the world is not only about the protests in Hong Kong that all we saw last year in different TV channel or social media. It's because Hong Kong people are the ones stand in the forefront to confront the largest authoritarian regime crackdown not only in Hong Kong. Yesterday is Xinjiang, today is Hong Kong, tomorrow is Taiwan, and later on is the rest of Asia, and especially for the Western world. So for how Beijing violate the promise in the Sino-British Joint Declaration, the UN filed document, I think it will not surprise at all in the future. Beijing will also use the same tactics to break the promise in any international treaty. So how to hold China accountability is not only the matter for Hong Kong people, it's also important for the world to aware that how could they deal with it and to push forward more of the attention on Hong Kong. And that's why we always say that if we wish to fight for freedom, it's important to stand with Hong Kong. Yeah. So I would say that with this, with the global community more and more realizing that China transformed it to be the second largest superpower, show no respect on international order or liberal value, it's time to take action, and action speak louder than words.
If you're joining us live and have a question or comment for Joshua, we will take them and we'll try to get them to him. You wrote in your book, political imprisonment is an inevitable step on the path to democracy. You had witnessed lots of young people, in the demonstrations in Hong Kong who were arrested and also who are serving time currently. And even if we look at Thailand right now, the thousands of folks who were protesting, a few of them have been arrested. There's 8 currently detained who are looking at serving some serious time and looking at some severe punishment and consequences and charges. And I'd love to hear, just your thoughts in terms of, I think for an activist like you, what is the worth for democracy? It probably means everything. But yet I'd love for people to also understand that our youths are being incarcerated, are being thrown in jail. Some are looking at life sentences, to be able to stand out there and protest peacefully for what they believe in. Talk to us about this idea that political imprisonment is an inevitable step on the path to democracy.
I would say that it's really difficult and always not easy to overcome the pressure. But what we ask for is we wish to determine our own destiny, and also we wish to let people to realize that how we deserve to enjoy freedom. And I also would love to give some of the brief update of my situation. So court hearing are fixed one after one for me in the upcoming months. Although I am facing jail for the 4th time, it's my humble wish that the global community would put more attention over the situation in Hong Kong. Lock activists up in prison, it's a tactics generated the chilling effect, and also the hardline strategy that keep us distant out from the society. In prison, the place that even I have the experience to force to train with marching exercise and squat day by days. Those are the pressure that not easy to overcome at all. But I'm sure it would be helpful to devote continuing attention to the development in Hong Kong, no matter regarding state target like myself or 12 detained activists in mainland China. Also, instead of expecting only rely on politicians or world leaders engaged in high politics, I think for ordinary citizens, how to confronting against Chinese state propaganda, lies, or fake news is also the way to stand with people of Hong Kong. So I think that's the reason that we really hope people to know that lock us up in prison is not easy to handle the pressure. We will miss our friends and families a lot. But I would say that even they lock our body up in prison, they can lock up our mind. And that's also enhance our determination to fight for freedom.
You've mentioned now a couple times the taking of activists who have been arrested from Hong Kong to mainland China. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I don't think a lot of folks maybe out here know what that's going on, as well as why China would be doing what would happen to them in China, in mainland China. Is this mainly a thing to basically take them away so that China can do with them what they wish, or what?
So more recently, we are more concerned about the 12 Hong Kong activists who were arrested and kidnapped in the sea by the Chinese authorities. 2 months have passed already, and 12 Hong Kongers in Shenzhen, in mainland China, are still denied access to lawyers, families, and medical needs. We suspect they are under torture during detention, and now we call for help on the international level. And I must thank the protester in Thailand and also politicians in different countries who are also supporting our cause on Twitter by taking part in our hashtag campaign, Save12. And as the one who have been arrested by Hong Kong police, prosecuted in Hong Kong courts, and locked up in Hong Kong prison, of course, that's a nightmare. But I think the more and more nightmare, or even the worst scenario, is to be arrested by Chinese authorities, being prosecuted in China courts, and also being locked up in China's prison. And I think that's experience already suffered by that 12 Hong Kongers. And how to urge the government to return them back, bring them back to Hong Kong, that's the most important demand for us right now.
And we talked a little bit, earlier about the U.S. involvement in terms of passing a couple bills pro Hong Kong. What other countries can be considered, alliances in this movement, especially when you talk about, again, young people or activists or freedom fighters, who may be facing another, atrocious moment or of some infringement of their rights. I mean, I think I can't officially say it, but it is like what you had just said, rumored they can be tortured. They're missing. I think what sparked the Thailand movement was an activist who had gone missing, but we even know, if his body's been recovered or what's going on, and people are fearing the worst, death. If we were to make a big enough noise outside of the United States, what other countries can be considered alliances?
To many dissidents and protesters in Hong Kong, with the national security law, is being forced to accept hostile strangers walking into our life. This fear becomes more horrible after 12 Hong Kong activists were kidnapped to China this August that I mentioned already. And we also are aware that we need to think about how to overcome the pressure, because no one could guarantee that, or to expect that today, maybe tomorrow, 6 a.m. in the morning, will riot police storm into your house with national security agent to arrest and detain you suddenly without any expectation. And I think it's important for the world to stand with Hong Kong. And stand with Hong Kong is not about the matter of left or right. It's about the matter of right or wrong. And no matter politicians, opinion leader, businessmen, or etc., how to hold China's accountability and urge them to respect the international order and liberal value. I think that's the challenge that we need to face. And we also hope to overcome it in the future. And if you ask how could we keep on the fight, no matter in local or global community, I would say that in these dark times, the last thing I would like to see is people losing faith, doing nothing about the situation, but counting down to more arrests ahead, more of the suppression or in the global community. It's also the reason we have to continue our struggle, no matter in local or global level, because we don't want our beloved ones to suffer. And I think for the global community, while I understand in the Western world, there are call for more cooperation, especially between European government or even for United States and China, to guide the regime, to guide this authoritarian regime towards democratic norms. That's the assumption when how the Western world welcome China to enter WTO. But to me, with the experience in the 2 decades, especially now with the leadership of Xi Jinping, these are only concessions. It is proven multiple times in terms of trade, digital security, or in territorial disputes that the communist government is not a responsible country who play by the rules. So I see no point of aiding and assisting the greatest threat to human rights to expand its scale of violence in Hong Kong, Xinjiang, Taiwan, and also in Asia. So I think how could a country around the world or for the global community reveal, reflect, and to amend its foreign policy to China and Hong Kong, especially after the national security law is implemented, which is really matter.
So there are certain things then that different governments can do to put pressure on and to sanction or try to pressure Beijing's government. Can you give individuals in other countries some concrete things that they can do online, that they can do communicating to their government, or that they can do with the companies they work on? What can individuals do to add their weight to supporting Hong Kong?
For individuals, it would be great to encourage their lawmaker or those elected councillors to care more about Hong Kong, and also encourage their leaders representing the country try to put Hong Kong under the global spotlight. And apart from on political aspect, I think how as a ordinary citizen or netizens with our hashtag Safe12 campaign, how to post it online, which would be also important, which also led authorities to realize that care about the 12 Hong Kong activists being secretly detained in China. It's not only about the matter of Hong Kong, it's also about the matter of the global community. And with how about the NBA censorship incidents in 2019, about how game players of Blizzard are being political censored, and also about how the Nintendo Switch game Animal Crossing is banned in mainland China. I think how the entertainment industry and how tech company that facing the pressure of China, or some of them kowtow to Beijing, how could those consumer or supporters of the entertainment industry or tech company could put more pressure on them, I think which would be also critical.
As you might know, and many people, you're tuning in, the United States in less than 2 weeks will decide on a president for the next 4 years. Whoever becomes president, does this matter to you in the movement?
More matter for Hong Kong people is we hope not only United States, but the Western world could continue to pay attention to Hong Kong. And no one could hold a crystal ball to predict the future. I remember 4 years ago when I traveled to the United States, it's exactly the week before and after the election day. So lots of the criticism and assume that President Trump might uphold the value of isolationism, never care about foreign policy or etc. That's the assumption we have 4 years ago. But with the previous 4 years, no matter you are agree or disagree as the supporter or haters of Trump or not, all we realize is no one expect or recognize Trump really uphold the ideology of isolationism, especially with the Trump administration put attention to Hong Kong, which is really irrelevant with the idea of isolationism. So I would say that in the upcoming future, we hope to seek for bipartisan support, and we wish different candidates, and also for those politicians, no matter they run for office as a senator, congressman, to be the president or etc., or they live in United States or not, they could continue to put attention to Hong Kong. I think that's really important if they think that the foreign policy towards China is matter.
As we look around the world where democracy is being threatened, or where people are trying to get it established and are being really, brutally beaten down, like such as Belarus, we see what's happening in Poland, Hungary, Turkey, Russia, the Philippines, Thailand, and of course, it's happening here in the United States. Michelle and I recently interviewed Philippine journalist Maria Ressa about her critical reporting of that country's authoritarian President Duterte. And I asked Ressa if it was essentially game over, is democracy losing? And she said, no, now is the time. Now is the time to fight. Are you essentially an optimist or a pessimist about this fight? One, you're clearly dedicated to fighting, but optimistic or pessimistic?
I've no hope towards the regime, but I've hope towards people. And always Hong Kong people surprise me a lot, and never upset on them. After the end of Umbrella Movement, without the concrete change in the political system, people always assume that it's already the end of Hong Kong. And after the 2014 Umbrella Movement, with 89 tear gas and people being arrested and locked up in prison, no one would care about politics anymore, especially for the generation born after the transfer of sovereignty. Those kids and youth might just love to travel to mainland China and using TikTok or Weibo or etc. That's our previous assumption. But in 2019, with the protest, it happened. It already proved that that's not the end game of Hong Kong. And one day is still under authoritarian rule. We are under and suffer in the infinity war. So perhaps it is a long-term battle for us. But I would always say that there's no reason for us to kowtow to Beijing. I think resistance will carry on in the dark no matter what the authorities judge us. We don't do things because it has a great chance to success. We do because it is the right thing and it makes sense. Perhaps defeat the Dark Vader need more and more time for us to overcome the fear and threat. But in the upcoming future, we'll have more and more young Jedi engaged in this battle.
You're so inspirational, and I can't help but just feel so connected, to the struggle and to the movement, and compassionate, for you. You've given up so much at a young age. You mentioned it at the top of the show. Since 15 years old, you're still facing other legal battles that will limit your own freedoms. And I can't help but ask, you're the people around you, the people who care about you, your family, and kind of, their perspective and how they feel. I would imagine that they're part of the fight, because the harder they fight, maybe the possibility of you being free is higher and higher. But what is it like, to have to continue to fight and ask for your family and friends to understand, what's at stake and what you're willing to give up for this movement?
My family and friends are really supportive, and they always encourage me to keep on the fight and not to give up. And I think how the parents support, which is really important. And in Hong Kong, a lot of pro-Beijing parents in the previous day have lots of criticism to those young generation. But since the protest in 2019, it just triggered more and more pro-Beijing elderlies or a generation of baby boomers turn to the side of pro-democracy.
I guess tell us what the current state is of Beijing's attempts to get, we've talked about the education law, which kind of got you started in activism. We talked about the national security law? And we talked about the elections being delayed. What currently is the government pushing? Do they have something they're trying to get established, like taking control of various institutions, or are they focusing on trying to keep it calm and just, intimidate activists such as yourself?
So in Hong Kong, while Beijing is not confident to take the majority for the pro-Beijing camp in the Hong Kong legislature, they just try and plan to cancel the election and postpone for at least 1 year. And not surprised at all, in 2021, they will postpone it for a year again and use different kind of excuse, no matter the emergency ordinance or COVID-19 or any kind of pandemics, because they fear about free election, because free election in the Hong Kong legislature implying that they might lose the majority. And finally, the legislature will turn to be the place that represented the voice of people instead of gathering a group of puppet of Communist China. And I would say that apart from the election being de facto call off, how China also plan to allow people live in Beijing and Shanghai to vote in Hong Kong election. But it's really unreasonable because people live in Hong Kong, only people live in Hong Kong could have the right to vote. And how can people that never live in Hong Kong could have the right to vote for the lawmaker that represented people of Hong Kong? And if the voting station set up in mainland China, in Beijing, Shanghai, or Shenzhen, not surprised at all, they would just enhance the greatest election manipulation in Hong Kong history. Yeah, so I think that's also what we care about.
Yeah, less than 8 minutes left. And so if you've got a burning question or comment, you can send them through and John will try to get them to Joshua. As we wind down, Joshua, I think, what's important for us is we're really trying to look forward to the future. I think these movements are making making some noise, at least. I mean, people are paying attention and people are seeing that change can happen. You had mentioned, a bipartisan or even yet anybody coming together for the fight for democracy. You've done that in the United States. You came to the States. You worked with folks like, Senator Marco Rubio and the president even, who had to sign that law, and then meeting, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. If you could give us just some thoughts on what is the overall kind of short-term vision that you might see for 2021, which is a very difficult conversation to have considering personally you're up against your own battles. But even for a country like Thailand that's going through, their political movement right now, and kind of what you might see could potentially happen in the next 3 to 6 months.
I'm not sure how will be the outcome, and no one could hold a crystal ball to predict the future. But I wish in 2021, people will be more care about Hong Kong, and Hong Kong will be still under the global spotlight. And more important is, since the outbreak of the coronavirus, with the export of the COVID-19 from Wuhan in mainland China to country all over the world, which already implying that Beijing is the country that Beijing is the one who show no respect on transparency, check and balance, and also have strong intention to punish the whistleblower and just result in this global pandemic. So how could the world urge and put pressure and to ask China to respect more of free flow of information, which is really important. And in the upcoming future, I will continue to urge people to engage in our hashtag #SafeTrade campaign, and also opposing setting up our voting station in Beijing or Shanghai, and how is the time to stop the political prosecution with the draconian national security law. And for the global community, how to deal with the post-pandemic era. We are not sure what will be the post-pandemic period, and we wish we could come as soon as possible. But later on, with the outbreak of this virus and how China show no respect and effort to the WHO, or WHO just become the puppet of the communist regime. I think those are the issues that the world must care about.
Now, you did put yourself forward as a candidate for office in Hong Kong before the government kicked you off. A, would you try it again? And B, say you are able to have some big successes there in Hong Kong, and democracy is stabilized or whatever. what do you see as your individual future? Do you see it as being in politics, or would you then focus on something else for a career? What do you see your future?
Even Beijing censored me twice from the ballot in 2019 and 2020 election, but they can't censor my involvement and qualification continue to engage in the democracy movement. And at the same time, we also know that it's not only about censor any candidate out from a ballot. It's about how they cancel the election and call it off directly. And in the future, I will continue to engage in political movement in Hong Kong, stay and fight until Hong Kong is Hong Kong again.
This most recent book that has been released, and thank you for that. A lot of it was written diary and journal entries that you'd written while you were in prison or serving time. What are some things that you learned during your time while you served?
When I was serving jail sentence, of course, it's the difficult time for me. But I always realized that my previous 8 or 10 years journey is already implying about actions speak louder than words and be the change we want to see. And we will continue to make change be the society instead of wait until graduate from school, entering the government or worse acts and professionals to enter the elite circle. More important is to take action, even we are still in school, even we are still a young kid, or even we still belongs to the young generation. So that's why spend time in prison is not easy, but it's also encouraged me to overcome the fear and threat.
You have questions, John?
Well, no. I mean, there was one question from the audience asking about how many protesters have been jailed since June 2019, and how many are still in jail. Do you know those numbers?
More than 10,000 Hong Kongers were arrested. More than 120 people were still physically locked in prison, and more than 2,000 of us still waiting for the trial, verdict, and sentencing.
Just a couple last questions. One, we had witnessed law enforcement around the world really utilize some of these tactics against peaceful protesters. Just in Thailand, the high pressure water being sprayed with tear gas here in the United States, and rubber bullets, and all of these things. Do you think that, I think we're making progress. I mean, here in the States, you see some states pass laws that make it illegal to use those types of things against freedom fighters, peaceful protesters. Will this catch fire?
All we know is authoritarian regime around the world will learn from each other, just like how activists around the world will learn from each other. And we know the police in Thailand already declared that they learned some of the tactics from Hong Kong police. And for some of the weapon and water cannon vehicles, Thai authorities claim that they purchased it in Asia also. So I think in the upcoming future, no matter we in the previous day have launched a campaign, urge United States to stop the exportation of tear gas canister to Hong Kong, and it's successfully being stopped in 2019. I think those kind of global campaign is also matter because the dictator will learn from each other, and also activists will learn from each other. So how we can learn as fast as possible and faster than those opponent, which is really critical.
Last question for you, Joshua, and we'll let you go. We've already spent an hour with you, and thank you so much for your time and for the information, the education, the activism, your courage. I can't, thank you enough for all that you do and for a lot of young people around the world. And the last question is really not that serious, but it's just a question of what do you do as a hobby for free time, fun time? What does Joshua do, to have a good time?
I love Avengers a lot, and I'm waiting for the new movie of Spider-Man, and also wish that because of the pandemic, it delay and delay and delay, and we hope I hope that before I go into the jail, I can watch the new Spider-Man movie. I'm really excited about it, and I also play PS4, and also waiting for the new game release in PS5. Yeah.
Well, we're gonna fight. We're gonna fight for you. Hopefully, we'll share the heck out of this show, and we'll try to get everybody involved so that Beijing and Hong Kong listens in both ways, and you don't have to serve any time. Hopefully, we're praying for that. Joshua, thank you so much for joining us here for the program, and again, thank you for your advocacy and activism for democracy.
Okay. Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us tonight for this special program. I'll leave John with the last words.
Thank you, Joshua. Thank you, Michelle. And thanks everyone watching us online, and have a good weekend. You can find out more about us, about past programs, audio and video, and everything else at commonwealthclub.org. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.